Hey, this is Wolf from Armoury-Terrain, and tonight we're going to make a cleaver for Halloween. Now, I know you can just buy these in the shops, but they're pretty bad, the ones you buy in the shops, and they never look right, and they're too thick, and the blood splatter on them just looks terrible. So if you've got more than half an hour, I suggest you make your own. I mean, if you're going to repaint it anyway, you may as well make it from scratch. So before we start though, I've got to give a shout out to one of my new viewers, Tanya from Wagga. This just shows how small the world of social media is. Tanya was my neighbour some 26, 27 years ago in Wagga. She lived in the flat just across the courtyard from mine. So that's going back a long, long time. So anyway, Tanya, I hope you enjoy making pumpkins and that this knife tutorial is useful to you. And tell your husband you were right. Okay, so the materials that we need today are some HDPE plastic. I'm using orange juice lids, I think these ones are. I bought a large container of them and I've got like 4 shopping bags filled with different coloured lids. That was a fun night sorting them out, I can tell you. We're also using a sandwich press, some baking paper, and then to cut it out, we'll either be using a jigsaw or maybe my bandsaw, or this plastic's pretty soft so you can maybe even get away with a box cutter. So let's look at what I'm doing with this. Okay, so here you can see my sandwich press and my big belly, and what I've done is I've put all the milk bottle top or juice bottle tops in face up. If you put them in that way around, you can get air bubbles as they melt, and no one wants air bubbles. So as you can see, I've got a sheet of baking paper underneath, got another sheet of baking paper on top, and then I just fold down my sandwich press. Of course, if I plug it in, it works a lot better, but it's easier to load it when it's not super hot. So we'll plug this in and come back in 7 or 8 minutes, I guess, and we'll see. Come on, little spider, you leave, it's going to get hot there. We'll see how well it's melted. Okay, so it's been about 8 or 9 minutes, and it's basically just long enough for the Breville to heat up properly. Now, the only restriction on the size of the plastic sheet you can make is how big your sandwich press is. So, let's have a look. Okay, so my sheet wasn't completely covered, and it got a bit gooey at the back. Such things can happen. So I'll leave it open for just a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift it out of the sandwich press and just move this hot thing back. This is just to give this a little bit of time out of the heat, just to cool down a tad. As soon as it started cooling down, you should go wait a little bit longer yet, but once it starts getting cool, you're able to peel the wax or the baking paper off it. Here we go. It's still a little bit warm. Sometimes a prodder like a screwdriver might help just to start it off coming off. So you can see here there's some fairly decent holes in this sheet at the moment. So what do we do to fix that? Easy. We get more bottle tops. And this time we center them over any hole or defect in your sheet. Now that I've loaded up again, goes back into the sandwich press. Don't forget to put the other sheet back on top, otherwise you'll end up with all sorts of problems. And close it down again for another, I don't know, 6 or 8 minutes. Okay, now if you want to use multiple sheets, you need to have something flat to cool these down between. I'm lucky, I've got some offcuts from a kitchen reno, so I've got 2 marble slabs from the countertop, or granite slabs, where they cut the sinks out. You could also use nice smooth timber or tiles. It's just something to put top and bottom so as it cools it doesn't ripple. Okay, my sheet's cooled. You can see it's got some rippling in it because it cooled too quickly. The way to get a completely smooth piece is to leave it cool in your sandwich press overnight, you know. Turn it off, let it sit in there and it'll gently cool. The faster it cools, the more it wants to contract and ripple. So it's not a bad sheet, it's a little bit flexible, but it's still very thin. So I'm thinking I can cut this out just with my box cutter. But I think I'm going to get some better cutters to cut this. Okay, if you go into Bunnings and look at cutters, you'll find that there's 3 different colours of the handles. Why is this, you might ask? Well, the yellow handled ones cut straight. These ones cut with the left hand, and these ones with the right hand. Now, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Not really for most things. So, let's just trim this up, shall we? Okay, so as you can see, if the handle's not long enough, so all I'm going to do is cut it off square-ish and draw another piece of handle to extend it out. Now, don't worry if this isn't super exact. It's meant to be an old rusty cleaver. This, if you want to get fancy, you can heat these 2 bits up with like your heat gun or pressing down onto the sandwich press and then press them together and they'll weld. But because I'm putting a piece of balsa wood either side, it'll hold it together and it doesn't actually have to chop anything. Okay, I'm going to square this up, give it a quick undercoat and show you where we're at. Okay, so I've got the cleaver. I've got a balsa wood handle on it. I've just used hot glue to put it together because there's not going to ever be that much pressure on it. But you can use super glue, you can use whatever will stick to the plastic. So overall, this is about 37 centimeters long, and you can see I've drilled the hole in it so it can hang up, and I've cut a couple of notches out of it as I shape the blade. I just used a sander to put a very slight bevel on it. Now, unfortunately, I can't finish this project tonight because I've left it too late and it's gotten too cold to use the spray paint properly. Yes, spray paint under a certain temperature will not come out of the can correctly, which is a downer. So anyway, I've got the handle on. I'll show you this other technique before we go. I'll just zoom in a bit. There we go, extreme close up. Okay, so at the moment it's a fairly smooth balsa handle. With just a flathead screwdriver, you could use a pen, you could use pretty much anything that's solid. I'm just going to press into it and drag it along to form some exaggerated wood grain. Doesn't have to be a huge amount. This is just to make it stand out better when we paint it, to look old and weathered. Still getting into the camera shot, there we are. So hopefully as I bring it up to the camera you can see the lines that I've scored into it. And in addition to that, I'll also be adding a couple of rivets to it. They won't actually do anything, they'll just look pretty. So anyway, I've got to leave this until it gets warmer in the morning to finish it. Well, here we are back in my workshop the next day, and I've successfully undercoated this with just a grey primer. Now to make it paint and make it look good. To paint it, I'm just going to use one of these brushes. Colours I'm going to use burnt sienna to start with for the handle, and a blue steel colour that I make by, actually no, this one's a grey. I'll have to go find my blue steel. The blue steel I make by mixing silver and a dark blue together, and it gives you a much more metallic steel look than just silver does. Anyway, okay, so now it is painted, and as you can see, the handle has had a black wash put over the burnt sienna paint, and that makes it look a lot older and grottier. But the blade is still too clean and shiny. So what I'm going to do is use some coarse sand. This is just some beach sand with pebbles and all sorts of rubbish in it. And using some super glue, I'm going to put some splotches of super glue on here. No rhyme or reason, just random bits, and then sprinkle some sand over it. And what this is going to do after we paint it is going to make it look like it's got a lot of surface rust, since this is an old scary cleaver. Let's get some good rusting up in here. About the only place you don't want too much rust is on the edge of the blade. So as you can see, that's coming up nicely. Let's do the other side. Now, if you don't have super glue, go and get some, because it's about the only thing that will stick the sand on properly without drying opaque. Don't forget to rust the back of it as well, or the spine of the blade as we should call it. Starting on this side, just with my same brush. All I'm doing is using the burnt sienna, loading it on the brush liberally, and then we're going to stipple it, paying most attention to the raised rust sections. Now, if you want this to look really, really cool, you should use a couple of different colors of oranges and orangey browns and stuff. To show the multiple layers of rust. So yeah, you're not brushing it on, you're just stippling it. By loading up the brush, wiping most of it out, and then hitting downwards. So obviously this cleaver is the sort of thing you'd see some, redneck psycho killer cabin in the woods style of fare. Don't forget to do the bit in between the handle. I am pretty happy with how this is looking. I mean, you surely wouldn't want to prepare food with this or have it wedged into you. As I said, you can add lighter colours of orange to give the rust a more 3D effect. And you can even add blood if you want. Remember, fresh blood is bright red, and then it gets darker and darker until it dries and turns brown. Anyway, this is Wolf from Armoury-Terrain coming to you from Brisbane on this hot, sticky winter's day with my new cleaver. Old cleaver, rusty, nasty thing anyway. And best of all, doesn't matter how hard somebody hits you with it, it's not gonna kill anybody. Like, you'll feel it, but it's not gonna cut. So yeah, guys, go out and make something.